Hello and welcome to the next installment of little films for helping you improve your report writing techniques. This is a film about lovely logical lists, about how you can achieve a logical coherence when you list things. I'm William Dunbar, so let's get started. Okay, so here we have four pieces of information, four objects that we want you to put in some sort of logical order. We've got Africa down here, we've got Kenya, this is Nairobi with a giraffe in the foreground, and we've got Belgium. So what might be a logical order for these objects here? Well, let's have a look. I think you might want to go from Africa to Kenya to Nairobi, because obviously Africa is the biggest, and then we're focusing down to the country of Kenya and the capital of Kenya, Nairobi. Or alternatively, you might want to go the other way, so starting with Nairobi, moving up to Kenya and up to Africa. But that list has a logical coherence, a logical structure. Well, what about Belgium, I hear you ask? Well, I think we should forget about Belgium, because we had a logical list relating to Africa, with Africa, Kenya, and Nairobi. That all made sense. Belgium didn't make sense. So when you have a list like that and you've got this other item that looks like it really doesn't belong in there, well, chances are it might not belong in there. So in order to achieve that logical consistency, you might want to think about discarding that other thing that other object, unless you can find a logical way of incorporating it. Okay, let's give you another example quickly. So here we have four countries in Africa: Kenya, Nigeria, Botswana, and Tanzania. Now they're all countries in Africa, so there's not particularly a sort of scale difference like there was before that we can put them into here. So let's see, how can we arrange this into a logical list? Well, what are we looking at? Why are we looking at these four countries? Now let's suppose we're looking at literacy rates. We're looking at literacy rates across the four countries. And this is real data taken from a 2008 UNDP survey. So Tanzania has a literacy rate of 72.3%, Botswana has a literacy rate of 82.9%, Kenya 73.6%, and Nigeria at 72.0%. So again, we can put them in a logical, hierarchical order, with here starting with Botswana as the highest literacy rate, then Kenya, then Tanzania, and then Nigeria bringing up the rear. Or we could do it the other way, like I say, if you want to talk about it from the other side, start with the lowest and going up to Botswana at the highest. So that's just an idea of how you might achieve some sort of logical consistency in your lists. And it's much better to do that and to be consistent in that than to jump around constantly going Tanzania, Kenya, Botswana, Nigeria, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, Botswana in some illogical way, because that's going to confuse your reader and might even give your reader the wrong idea. He might sort of be used to looking at things in one list structure, and then when you change that list structure, he might get confused. He or she might get confused. So do try and achieve that logical ordering of information and be consistent throughout your reports, because that's going to be massively helpful to the reader and ultimately to you getting your point across. So now let's just look at a quick example from the real world that we've actually seen in our reports. Okay, here we are. So this is an example from a report we looked at about social networks in Georgia. So not only is this a piece of very convoluted, bad writing here, with a terrible start to the paragraph, which we've discussed before, but also, if you look at the way that the information is ordered, the list is completely illogical. So we're looking at urban Georgia, the capital, and rural areas. Now, what would be a sensible way of looking at this? Well, normally we have a hierarchy like we talked about earlier. So we do capital, urban, rural in terms of scale of settlement types, or maybe again we go from the other way, rural, urban, capital from the bottom up. But here we have urban Georgia starting as the lowest percentage of positive answers, which is again a bad way of phrasing it, when compared with the capital, and rural areas. So we have in just this three-part list: urban, capital, rural. Now, there's no logic to that. So why might you choose to do urban, capital, rural? Well, again, you might follow the data. But again, this hasn't happened here. So we've got 35 to 48 to 40. So it doesn't follow the data. There's no sort of logical coherence to this list. When we go further on, we do start following the data. We have rural at 48, urban at 45, and capital at 39. So that does follow the data: 48, 45-39 is a nice decreasing progression. So that makes sense. That has some logical consistency. But up here, there's no logical consistency at all. It doesn't follow the classic capital, urban, rural, capital, urban, rural, rural, urban, urban, capital, and it doesn't follow the percentage either. So that's something we should avoid. Thank you very much.